evening.
Good evening.
We are here, and once again, it is our great pleasure and privilege to be in your reality. We have not ventured up here into the North Carolina mountains, a long chain from the Appalachians, for a number of years now. And it was Ken and Dee who used to bring us here. So we give Ken from along the lines of time a bit of a salute because he has departed this world. And we thank all of you for coming out on this lovely spring evening to explore the potentials of your own existence, to look at the various facets of what is going on. We remind you that there are truths, and there are truths and truths and truths and truths. And so it depends on where you are standing, what you are looking at. Gail and Michael titled this evening, Navigating Tumultuous Times. So that says something to us, that you recognize that times are tumultuous and you want to know how to get through them, yes?
Yes.
Well, our vehicle gave you a good ABC of the basics, which we've covered many times. And we will remind you, though, that there's another important tidbit to navigating tumultuous times. Yes, you must be grounded and have your feet on the ground. You must be really in your body, not spacing out here, there, and everywhere, and throwing your attention like milkweeds to the wind. This is a time for you to gather yourselves together and to feel who you are and to develop the absolute, most sublime, exquisite, best sense of humor that you've ever had. Better than that. You must be able to laugh at yourselves. That is part of divine consciousness, truly. When you start to really see what fuels existence, what births you into being, what supports you through life, there is energy. You all know that energy is everywhere. Your problem is you don't take enough time to pay attention to it. You lead busy lives. And that is part of what the nanosecond is, yes? It's a time of busyness. It's a time when so many things can happen all at once. We describe the nanosecond as each second that unfolds has the potential, you have the potential to know so much more than you knew the second before. You are opening knowledge. From your world's point of view, it looks as if you are becoming a global, let's say, village, and you are all wired up and connected and all this, and people are finding out, and they can do whatever they want here, there, and everywhere. And that is, let's say, a symptom, a sign, an out-picturing of what is happening on other levels. It is important for all of you to remember all the time that there are many levels at which things operate upon. They are innumerable. You think you learn the game and you figure out these components, and then you get a bump up in consciousness, and the game suddenly is more complex and bigger. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. Just like growing up. Just like the progression from the little toys you played with and then the little things you used, to wagons and tricycles on up to bicycles and automobiles and who knows what these days. There are progressions in consciousness. And this is what you are, let's say, and being initiated into collectively is a major transformation of consciousness. Our vehicle said earlier, a flowering of consciousness. We like that particular noma there, flowering of consciousness, because it is spring and because of what our vehicle drew for you on the board. Now you have to picture it in your mind. But that these signs and the times all indicate that humanity is really, really ready to flower. Now, at this point in your development, ideally you will all have noticed greater sensitivities, greater perceptual awareness, heightened activity in the dream states, perhaps, let's say, punctuations and different, let's say, junctures with phenomena. Nothing too big and outrageous, but little sparks of light here and there, or things popping in the third eye or out of the corner of the eye, but much more enticing. There is a seduction, if we can use that word in a positive way, a sort of, let's say, romanticizing humanity with energy so that you will not be frightened of what the next levels you are to come to. Now, many in the mass public are recognizing finally that something is coming together. For years, as this energy was building, people ran to doctors here and there and everywhere, and they wanted all kinds of drugs to, let's say, alleviate the confusion of memory and opening to other lines of times and personal stuff and all the stuff that is coming out. And so for quite a number of years, every year, more and more people on antidepressants and these kinds of things. And then, lo and behold, you create a mass dream, and then it pops the big bubble. And recently it came out that antidepressants are no more effective than expensive Tic Tacs. In other words, that when the real studies came out, they showed that placebos, the sugar pill, had a greater effect in alleviating depression than the so-called medication. That is what is meant by those studies. But it is a sign. It is a sign that people have suddenly stopped their crutch. Their crutch is now not there. It is like Dumbo lost its feather. Do you remember that story?
Yes.
Dumbo, what, could only fly with a feather. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And then what happened? He lost the feather, and he was taunted by the crows, and somehow he got his courage together, and he did it. And that is a metaphor for where you are, the crutches that humanity has witlessly become dependent upon, all in the name of being manipulated on one level, on one level. And that level, or the, let's say, tiers of it, are your lives, and they are rich. And one could say in the lines of time, and if you look at history and how history progresses and the probabilities that spring off from it, you are exploring an avenue of reality. And that avenue involved you being psychically flatlined, pretty much across the board on the planet. And that took thousands of years to come about. Lots of repression, lots of persecution, punishment. And in the last 2,000 years, you know where that came from in general. Yes? The age of Pisces. It was called the rule of the fish. It seems to us that one of your churches has a symbol of a fish, and that their head fish is in big trouble right now. He is in very, very, very big trouble. They are sticking it to him. Well, in certain terms there. Now, these are events in your world, but they are symbols. Even if they are manipulated and navigated on what you call behind the scenes physical levels, there are always other components involved. Energies, astrological weather, as our vehicle was describing it. There are the soul's purpose inside each being. There are the karmic situations that each person would attract or be, let's say, contracted to in a certain lifetime, or drawn to, etc. So the components are all, let's say, building and becoming more complex, because as the energy accelerates, your world is not as fixed, it is not as reliable as it was in the 50s. All right? And even to jump back to the 50s, we will say just before that, when you started exploding atomic bombs, that's when everything started ripping open. That is a probability that birthed itself. You all come from that probable world that played with bombs in that way. To give you an example, to jump back a little further, 100 years ago there was a Tesla probability, thereabouts. You are not in that probability. That probability is flourishing, it has a world that is flourishing. In your world, it is being used behind the scenes. It is super technology that was suppressed from the public and distributed to after World War II, before and after World War II. And many of the things that you are meeting in your world today come from technologies that were, let's say, developed 100 years ago and more. And those technologies would also have been connected to other lines of time, perhaps Atlantean or other Egyptian, other places where